In this video we'll show you how we can do some roughing operations using the new 3D CAM Pro Plus. So I've started the software, so this is the model that we've imported. So to produce the roughing toolpath we go to the milling tab, and what I want is advanced machining. So this is the dialog box which handles all of the functions that we need to do area clearance, roughing and finishing. So the first thing is the feeds. So this is where we set up the feeds and speeds for various operations. Here we can also switch on rapid retract. The tool we want to use is taken from our tool library. Let's have a 10mm tool, and we can give this operation a name so that it appears in our objects window here under this name. The surface paths we're going to look at are based on triangle mesh. There's three different types: surfaces, triangle mesh and wireframe. Surfaces is mainly for finishing, triangle mesh is for roughing, finishing and lots of different operations. Wireframe is based on 2D and 2.5D geometry. So we'll choose triangle mesh, and the type of cut we want is a roughing pass. The type of options that we have are offset, which follows the rough outside shape. We have parallel, which will give us a zigzag type of toolpath, and we have adaptive, where the tool will try to cut just a set amount per pass. So we choose whichever one of those we want to use. The first thing is to set up the machining surfaces. So we choose this option, and we're presented with this dialog box here. So this is where we can set up the surface that we want to machine, and this is also where we can set up fixtures if we have them. So to select a machining surface, I use this button here, and you can either choose the model from the screen or you can choose it from the objects window over here. So we click and then press enter. Having selected the machining surfaces, we can decide whether we want to offset those surfaces. So this would be good if we wanted to leave a finishing allowance on for subsequent cutting. We have two methods: global, where the amount we put in the offset value here applies to the whole model, or we can have separate values for radial and axial machining. So if you want to, you can set up a roughing and finishing pass using this offset. Having selected the machining surfaces, the next thing is the heights. So we can have it select automatically the heights from the machining surfaces. If we want to choose our own start and finish heights, we can use the user defined here, and we can either type in the values or we can choose the values from the model. But in this case we'll use the automatic heights. The depth can either be a set value or it can be a number of slices. So let's have, say, 2.5mm there, and I'm going to leave all the other options as the defaults. The one thing I do need to do is use this step over here. So this is the amount of tool step over between each pass. So if I'm using an offset path, that's an exact value. If I was using an adaptive path, then it would be a desired value. So we'll just stick to offsets. Under the link tab here, we can set up whether we want to use ramping or not. The ramping is set under the roughing tab, which we'll come on to in a second. And in this case we need to look at the retracts. So these are the values where the tool will start from and where it will go between each of the different passes. So you can set up different values for the amount of feed and entry retracts. Under the roughing tab here we can set up a style of approach. So this is ramping. Automatic will choose which is the best one to use between line, helical, zigzag and profile. So if we leave that as automatic for the time being, so if we have set a ramping, then we go back into the link tab and we choose to use that ramp. So it can be used in various stages. The utility may or may not have any features or options there depending on the option that we've chosen. So to see the toolpath, we click OK, and that calculates the toolpath based on the tool that we've used and the various parameters that we've set. So that's the toolpath that you can see there. Okay, now you'll notice that it's only cut the cavity and it hasn't machined from a piece of stock. If we want it to machine a piece of stock, we have to define that. So if I double click on the roughing operation here and go into the roughing tab, now I can set up a stock definition. So the type of stock that we can define is a bounding box, which will be, as the diagram shows here, the extents of the model, and that can either be expanded or shrunk depending on if we want to leave extra on there. The other options that we've got are surfaces. So if we had a roughing or a casting surface, we could use that as the roughing stock. So we'll use a bounding box and we'll make that 10mm bigger all over. The other thing that we could do with this is we could use 2D containment, or we can use the part silhouette. So having done that, it's now recalculating the toolpath, and now it takes into account the stock material that we used and defined. So that's a brief introduction into the roughing toolpath.